Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a new episode of Eve Echoes. I'm really glad to be back. I have a lot of content that I wanted to put out, but unfortunately I was pretty much swollen. I had some nasty teeth surgeries and it was pretty nasty. I've been eating some straws and stuff, so I wish this to none. And I finally got back my ability to speak properly, and here I am, and we're going to go through some stuff that's really important. There's a lot of stuff and kinks and nicks to how to do proper scanning, and a lot of the intricate and back-end mechanics of how the scanning mechanism works. And most of this was pretty much brought up by one of our subscribers, and it goes by the name of Borzy, and he put some interesting questions up front, which really intrigued me, and I figured out, I realized that I haven't explained these and how they work. So here we are doing a full explanation of the hidden mechanics behind scanning. So let's get some stuff cleared out right off the bat before we get into Borzy's comment, mostly because it's very important and how the mechanic works. So you have the narrow scanner and you want to scan for people. You activate the scanner and you get some results. How do you get those results? Based on what? Well, there's a couple of criteria points that you need to understand. First of all, the ships that you're trying to get a signal of need to be in space. If they're docked or they're cloaked, you won't get a signal off of them. And criteria number 2, which has the same level of importance, in order to scan somebody down, their source radius, which is an attribute of their ship, needs to be higher than your minimum scan radius that shows up on the module itself. These are very important, and if the source radius of the scanned ship is lower than your minimum scan radius that shows up on the module, you'll pretty much not see that result, his ship, on your initial scan. Another very important fact is that when you're scanning, when you activate that scanner module, you do a sweep of the system. No warnings are issued to any player. So with all this said and done, let's head over to Borzy's comment and see what he was asking about. Speaking of which, can you test some stuff with a buddy and do a comprehensive deep dive into scan evasion? Like if someone scans you and you warp to a different location, what do they see? Or if they scan you mid-warp? Or if they scan you, then you cloak, do you disappear? Or if you're powering along with an MWD or an afterburner, do they warp to where you are or where you were when they scanned you? These are some very serious questions, and we will be answering them one by one. So let's dive in deep and try to answer the first question, which is, if someone scans you and you warp to a different location, what do they see? So as I mentioned, when you do the system sweep, when you activate the scanner, you will get all the signals that match the criteria that I've just introduced you to. So they need to be in space, not docked, not cloaked, in space, and they need to have the source radius higher than your scan radius. If any of those conditions fail, basically you will get no signal. Duh. So another interesting point of the scanner is when you do the system sweep, it collects all the signals that can be read given this criteria. But there's another hidden mechanic inside, and it basically collects the information at the exact point in time at which you perform the scan. So if a ship is in one place at exactly that time when you ran your scan, if the ship moves out of there, like warps out, docks up, cloaks up, jumps out of the system, well, you still have the scan signature, but you will not be able to reach any conclusion if you go into a deep, like play the minigame and reach through the analysis and try to figure out this scan signature and how to warp to it. So if you ran your scanner while a ship was in a location, you got the source signal. If the ship warped out, you still see the signal unless you perform another scan, of course. But if you try to analyze it, you will reach a dead end and you will find nothing to be able to warp to. If you get to 100%, the list, the menu in which you can select the targets to warp to will be empty. Of course, if we're talking about only one ship, but more of this later when we talk about multiple targets. So if there's one ship and he warped off where you initially scanned and got his result from, the basic result will be empty and you will not be able to warp to. And that's why there's a refresh button when you're doing the analysis to try to get it 100% and be able to warp to it. That refresh button is critical if you're trying to scan somebody down and, you know, people are now aware that somebody is in system and they pay attention. Of course, we're not talking about bots here, but if somebody is in system and they're being suspicious, the best option is to dock up, cloak up, warp to some safe spot and cloak up, or just get the hell out of the system. So your best bet is to click that refresh button and see if your target is still there, because it's really important, saves you up on time. You don't need to search for something that is not there anymore. So that helps you and gives you an indication if the target you're trying to scan down is still at the location. So answering Borzy's question, if you manage to get a signal, but on refresh, you don't get any signal anymore, you will be instructed with a message that the source of the signal is no longer there. It's pretty much clear that the person probably warped out of there. Or again, might have just docked up or cloaked. You cannot tell the difference. What you know is that the signal, the source of the signal that you got your acquisition when you run your system sweep, is no longer present at that location, or at least detectable by your scanner. Going on to item number 2. If they scan you mid-warp, well, it's the same thing as the previous question. The player was mid-warp, you performed your system sweep, the scanner recorded where he was right then at that moment, but he's no longer there, so just hitting the refresh button will kind of confirm that he's not there anymore, so you can just ignore and move on to the next signal. Or I don't know, if maybe you close the scanner, you'll see that the system is now empty, because probably the ship that was mid-warp and was in transit through this system has probably jumped out. So saves you up on time, just move along. These are not the droids you're looking for. Moving over to the next question. If they scan you and you cloak up, do you disappear? Well, yes, you do disappear. Now, the signal that was emitted by your ship when he ran, when whoever was scanning ran his scanner, will show up on his scan results. But if you cloak, meanwhile, well, if he tries to get on the minigame and tries to, you know, remove the noise signals and try to lock up on your signal 100% so he can warp to you, well, the result will be empty. And of course, that will also be an indication if it hit the refresh button and notice that the source of the signal is no longer there, and the search and the analysis may yield no results. For example, in a situation in which there are no stations inside the system, you do a scan sweep of the system, you notice that there's one signal, you start analyzing it, and suddenly he's not there anymore, and then you perform another scan of the system to try if maybe he switched locations, and you're still not getting him. Probably, and most likely, he cloaked up inside a safe spot, because he's still in the system, can't be docked. Most definitely, he cloaked up. Moving over to the next question. If you're powering along with an MWD or an afterburner, do they warp where you are or where you were when they scanned you? So yes, this is a pretty interesting question. As I mentioned in previous videos, when you're scanning somebody that is doing an encounter or, I don't know, a story mission, something that is like an instance, when you scan them down and they're moving all over the place probably, and they're not located right where the beacon is. If you're trying to warp and you scan them down and you're trying to warp to them, your warp will be relative to the beacon itself, not the ship that is inside that instance. So this question does not apply to that specific scenario, but most likely this is a question like if somebody is just sitting in a safe spot at some random planet or in between planets. He made a safe spot a bookmark while mid-warp, and he's trying to, I don't know, hide in plain sight. Yeah, in plain sight, because now we have scanners. So what happens is, if the player is not inside an instance like a beacon nearby, even though you will be warping relative to the player's ship, it will actually be relative to the location of the source signal that you caught on your scanner when you did the system sweep. And why is this important? Because, as mentioned in the question, what happens if there's a player that just goes into a safe spot and then immediately drives off into one direction in space using his micro warp drive or his afterburner? Well, you are going to find his ship. Now, there's a let's call it the source signal that you're getting as results when you do your system sweep kind of generate like some signal beacons. And those signal beacons, I think they have a range of 1,000 kilometers, just as much as your targeting range. I may be wrong about this, I don't know the exact range, but I think it's 1,000 kilometers. So I would say down from the source signal that you detected initially, there's a 2,000 diameter bubble sitting on top of that, and everything that is inside that bubble, that fictional bubble, can be still detected. Even if you tap that refresh button, you'll still get that the source of the signal is still there, and if you go to 100% on analysis, you will see the ships that have been in there because they're still there, yet they are not exactly in that same specific position because they've been moving using the micro warp drive and the afterburner. So you scan them down and you say, well, I'm going to warp to it, and you're warping to it. You should land right, if you're warping to 0, you should land right on top of that ship, but you land there and the ship is like 200, 300 kilometers wherever that micro warp drive player was driving in direction. So to answer Borzy's question, yes, if the player is moving, when you initially detected the scan, you get like a fictional beacon placed right on top where he was at when you did your system sweep. So if you go through analysis and get him to 100% and you can warp to it, you will reach there, but there will be no one because it keeps moving, and you will see him at 200, 300, 400 kilometers away from your initial scan point where the source of the signal was located. So that's pretty much it on Borzy's question, and all of these questions and answers pretty much tie in to two more things that I want to share with you guys about the hidden mechanics in the back end, what's happening with the scanning system. So first of all, I mentioned that when you're cloaked, you will not show up on the scanner anymore after the scan guy runs his analysis and pretty much goes into telling him that there's nothing there. What happens if there's multiple people? Well, if there's multiple people sitting inside the same spot, you do get just one signal. This is kind of ties into the fact that I told you about with the beacon that's fictionally put in where the initial source signal was detected when you did your scanner sweep. So if there's multiple people sitting inside the same spot, you will get like a notification that you got a source signal, and you can try to analyze it and identify. And to your amazement, you will find that there's 6, 7 ships sitting inside the same space, but you just got one signal. And this is why I think there's a bubble around where your signal was initially detected, and everything inside there is kind of treated like the same signal. But in there inside, once you finish up your analysis, you can find multiple ships and you can warp to them. And this is an interesting point, because if you tie in together with the question about cloaking, well, there's been some stuff going on, you know, piratey stuff, and of course pirates are hunting PvE guys, but also pirates are hunting other pirates because it's fun, why not? So there's been some guys that have been setting up bait ships, like ravens, like cyclones, like, I don't know, some weird ships, as bait, fully tanked, sit on mid slots just with points and scrams and newts, and a bunch of frigates and cruisers that are covert ops, like bombers or arbitrator covert ops or something similar, have been sitting cloaked nearby, and you just detect that one signal, you warp to it, and suddenly when you try to engage thinking, haha, I finally caught you, surprise, there's like 5 or 6 people decloaking, and they're gonna mess you up. Now, another interesting thing about the scanner system is that the people sitting cloaked where the source signal was first identified, for example, right beside that Raven that you just caught the signal of is a bomber, which is a frigate and has a very low source radius. When you scan the stuff down and you reach the analysis complete, all the ships inside the same source beacon, a source signal beacon, will get a trigger warning roll, and that's a comparison between your scan radius and the source signal of the ship that you're analyzing. So if there's multiple ships sitting inside the same beacon, the trigger warning roll will be determined on each of those ships. So if there's 5 ships sitting inside the same space grouped and you scan one signal actually locating all of them inside, the big ships will probably not get a warning, but the small ships do get a warning because their source radius is pretty small, and compared to your signal acquisition, they do get a warning, unless you have like tremendous skills and rigs and bullshit bonuses. But also another interesting fact is that if you are cloaked, you still get the warning, because the warning says it all. It says this area was revealed to other players. Not necessarily mean that you were scanned down and can be warped to. For example, if you're sitting inside a safe spot and you notice somebody jumped inside the system and they probably began scanning and they probably have your signal, if you cloak up, you will get a warning when they will be finishing their analysis, even though on their side in the context menu they will not see any targets to warp to. This is really interesting on how the system and how the mechanics work. So I hope these things kind of clarify what a lot of people were missing, and sorry if I didn't catch on and manage to figure out at least now on how these work, and trying to put this out to you guys so you can be more aware of how the system and the mechanic of the scanning system works. Thank you, Borzy, for your question, and that kind of raised a bit of awareness, and I'm happy I managed to put this content out, and hopefully this will help a lot of you guys understanding how all this works. Don't forget, we got our community question of the week. Finally, we will be announcing the winners. The question is, do you think there's any chance for solo content in Nihilus Space? We're going to be announcing the winners and this Wednesday. So drop a comment below and let me know, and automatically get into the giveaway pool. That's it for today. I hope you guys learned something. Thank you guys for watching. A very big shout out to my channel supporters, and I'll see you guys next time. Cheers.